Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dialogue Denver DA. I'm Tamara Banks. Mitch, great to see you again.
Good to see you, Tamara.
I'm so excited about our guests that we have with us today, Carlos Bello and Javier Mapalme. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you said it was French, not Spanish, yes. So I was taking a stab at it. So great of you to come. And sir, let's start first with you. You've only been in Denver a short time. Tell folks a little bit about what your office does and what your position does here in Denver.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, as a Consul-General of Mexico in Denver, we have, like you said, a very busy homework to do here because, number one, there is over 1 million Mexicans in this area. And I'm talking the area of our Consul General, which is Colorado, part of Montana, and part of Wyoming. So it's a pretty busy thing for us. Most of we do a lot of kinds of work for the community, but the most important thing is the protection, support, and assistance of the Mexican and Mexican American who are in this area. We also have a lot of programming and documentation, for example, which is pretty big in our council. For example, last year we expedited over 95,000 documents, and we're doing an average of about 300 to 350 passports a day.
Wow.
A day. We are the country that makes a passport in 1 day. We do it in our office. We do also a lot of work with our communities. We find the communities, we find several people that unite in several clubs from different states of Mexico. And they bring their own communities, and they have their own clubs, and we work with them very closely because we get closer to those communities through them, which is very important. We also do a lot of cultural programs. We do work with the education, and we are working, and we're very happy to work with the DA, for example, because that's very important, the cooperation between us and them in this type of field, so that the people, the community of Mexico, will know perfectly what they have to do in an event of a situation that they might have difficulty.
And I didn't realize you covered those other states. That's Montana and Wyoming.
And Wyoming. We also have, see, I'm a Consul General. There is 3 other consuls that depend on us, which is the Consul General, the Consulate of Salt Lake City, the Consulate of Boise, and the Consulate of Nebraska. Yes.
And can you talk about what the difference is between a consulate and an ambassador out of an embassy? There's a big difference.
Okay, yes. Well, the ambassador is really a person who is there to strengthen the relations and the very well, everyday living between the two countries, While the Consul General is, like I said, we are here to work for the Mexican community, which is very large in this area and in the United States.
What he tells me the difference is that he does all the work.
Well, no, my good friend Eduardo Medina Mora, who's the ambassador, is a great person. We know each other for a long time.
Right.
And he's doing a very good job in here. We, the consuls, of course, have a lot of work, but mostly with the community, Yes. Yes.
And so talk a little bit more about that relationship between your office, Mitch, and the consulate. I mean, I would imagine there's it's important to have a good, strong relationship.
Well, Denver's just incredibly lucky to have the consul and have the Consul General here in Denver. We don't have that with every country that we come in contact with in the criminal justice system. So, a few years ago, I tried a case where an Eastern European man had murdered a Brazilian woman, and neither of those two had an office here. They had an honorary consulate, which is usually a U.S. citizen who has been selected by that country to do some things, but it's much different than having an actual office here. I've been over to the office, I think 3-4 times over the course of, they moved. The first time I went, they were in a smaller place in Cherry Creek, and now they're off Leedsdale. And it is just an incredible operation. To see the people that go through and get processed and get papers, and in the United States you can't get a passport in 1 day, but you can off Leedsdale And that's the kind of system that they have there. It's a very technical system. It's a very advanced system. There's a connection with Mexico City. It's incredible to see. But as far as our relationship goes, unfortunately, victims of crime are sometimes citizens of Mexico. Sometimes we have to charge a citizen of Mexico. And when we do that, then there are things we have to do as far as responsibilities of notification and those types of things. And their role is really to make sure that the rights of their citizens are protected in our system. And that's very important. It's very important for the credibility of our system, but also of what their job is, to make sure that somebody gets treated fairly. I think almost everybody in Denver remembers when Officer Donnie Young was killed. He was killed by someone that then fled to Mexico, and he was a Mexican citizen. So we had to go through a fairly complicated process of finding him in Mexico, getting him arrested there, going through our State Department to make sure he was brought back here to Denver. And we worked hand in hand with their office at the time, both one, making sure that we did everything right as far as being able to get that individual back here, but also once he got back here, that his rights were protected as he went through the murder trial and the process that we had here.
And I imagine one of the challenges that you face is, back to your point about the victims, many don't speak English, so they're in a place where they're not familiar, and secondly, they may not trust authorities. Maybe there's a cultural issue around that, so maybe, Javier, this might be a good opportunity to sort of share that insight there if you...
Sure. I think that that's actually a challenge to overcome the fear of the community, and that's why we work very closely with not only the Denver DA but other law enforcement agencies, so we can build this bridge of trust between our community and law enforcement, so they understand what exactly they do. They're here to serve and protect rather than just prosecute. So if someone is it's being prosecuted, as Mitch said, we have to make sure that there's a due process of law. But if someone is a victim, we want to make sure that that victim, first of all, reports, and they know where they can report. If they can go to the police department or the DA, and they can trust them. So we work very closely together with them, so we can build that bridge between the community and the law enforcement agencies.
Which is very important, like Javier said, many Mexicans, for example, do not contact the authorities because they're afraid. Most of them are people without documents. And they might think that when you contact a local authority on this basis, that they might be deported to Mexico, and that is not the case. We've been very active with the DA here in Denver, and others like Javier said, and we've been able to do a very nice bridge of communication and cooperation, so that people will understand that. We understand very well that anybody who committed a felony has to pay for that. We are just trying to, and a way of protecting, just like Mitch said, our protection is to see that their rights are treated fair like everybody else.
Tamara, there's another issue that we have talked about. We've had a meeting about, we've had a show here about the Rose Andem Center in domestic violence. Right. We know that that's one of the most unreported crimes out in our community in general. But we also know that in certain communities where there isn't that trust, that non-reporting is even that much higher. And so all of those issues that we talk about with domestic violence, the impact it has on kids in the household, the repeated nature of it over and over again, 11 times before somebody will even come forward. If they have another fear, if they're afraid, hey, I'm going to get deported, or my family is going to be taken apart, somebody's going to get sent back to Mexico, the kids maybe were born here, that kind of thing, there's another reason to not report. So we work together and have talked about that whole issue and about how we're trying to bring that out of the shadows and how we're trying to make it a place where somebody can walk in, get help, maybe not involve the police at all, but get that help they need to get out of that domestic violence situation. And that's something we're working closely together with.
That's got to be very frightening for young people in particular, or a woman who's here maybe by herself and you know is with someone who's supporting them supposedly, you know, and has gained their trust, and now they've got to somehow report that this person is abusing them.
Yes.
Do you see a lot of that? I don't know if you have numbers off the top of your head, or can you quantify that?
Javier, please.
If
You've been
I
here
think
longer.
we do see a lot of these cases from time to time, and as the DA said, the main problem is the reporting, and it's very hard for these victims to come out and say what's going on. So the building of this center would be great for making a very safe environment for these victims. And actually the consulate is also a safe environment. So we function as a link between the community and law enforcement. So, or not even law enforcement, if they choose to contact first an organization, a non-profit organization that can help them out with that, we would definitely refer them to them. So I think, I don't have the specific number, but it's unfortunately often that we
Some
receive
of the
these
victims,
cases.
you want people to report, and it's difficult if you don't know the language and know the culture. And Mitch, I imagine there's people who prey on those folks who are particularly vulnerable, who don't know the language and may be fearful to come and report.
Absolutely. We will see predators, sometimes sexual predators, sometimes violent predators, that actually prey on a particular group because they think they're not going to report. It wasn't all that many years ago I tried the case of a man that was sexually assaulting Asian women. And when we went up into the Asian community, and there was a group of refugees that had moved here from Vietnam, and we started talking about this man, the elderly men knew because he had been robbing them. He would walk into their homes and steal things. He was committing all kinds of crimes in that community. And if it wasn't for those two brave victims that came forward that had been sexually assaulted, we never would have uncovered what he was actually doing to that community. So this trust is so important.
Right.
And that's why we work so closely together.
Well, speaking of victims, really survivors, I covered that flood in September, the biblical proportions. Everybody's still talking about it. And anyone who lost their life, family, property, suffered a great deal. But again, folks who didn't have a whole lot to start with lost even more. And there are a lot of people who had their documents completely washed away in the flood. Talk a little bit about the work that you've done with the flood survivors from Mexico that are here in Colorado.
Okay, unfortunately, I was not here when it happened in September. However, Javier was here, and Javier worked very closely with the DA of
Boulder County.
Boulder County. Tell us about your experience with respect to that, Javier.
Sure.
I think it's a good idea.
The first thing we did, just after the rain was going in, and the day after, we went to the site. And we did that through all that week and the weekend and then the week after, just to assess what the situation of the Mexican community was there. So after that, we, with more strategy, we started organizing community meetings where we'd have FEMA, different organizations that were working with the victims of the floods, the Red Cross, Boulder County sheriffs, and Boulder County DAs. So we can attack those predators that Mitch was mentioning a while back, that were trying to take advantage of these victims and of the situation as well. So we did those community meetings, and the purpose of those was, again, to foster the trust of the community and let them know what the different resources were available for them. So the consulate was in the middle of it, but what we did was to bring together all the different resources in Spanish, and also not only in Spanish, but in like a cultural translation, so people can understand and can really assess what's going on. Because, for instance, FEMA would have the Department of Homeland Security logo, so which is the same one of ICE. So for us to let them know and for them to understand what FEMA was doing there was very important, because it could be the difference between having something left or not. So there was a second phase, and after that, probably a month almost after, we did a mobile consulate where we went to Evans and with probably 15 to 20 people from our staff, and we set out like a consulate there in Evans in a very small school, and we issued passports, and also we gave out economic aid, which is very little in comparison what FEMA has in the budget, but still I think it was very helpful for the victims at that time. And we continue to do that effort. We're following very closely what the aftermath is, and we're working with the governor's office right now in the implementation of the funds that federally were transferred to Colorado, so we can be involved and the Mexican community is taken into account in this effort.
Because even 6 months later, they're still needing a little help to get on their feet.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about the economy. And we often think about, this image of, well, Mexico doesn't really have an economy, that's why everybody's coming here, very one-sided, almost racist mentality. Talk about the economy and the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico.
Well, number one, in Mexico, it's a big country. We're not as big as the United States, of course, but we're the fourth biggest economy in the world. We're a $1.3 trillion economy. Our economy now is very steady, for example. We have 4% of inflation in the last 8 years, every year, okay? Our unemployment is 5%. That's why you're seeing less and less people coming into the United States because they are finding the jobs in Mexico, okay? And for example, just trade between Mexico and the United States, we do $500 billion a year. If I would like to tell you in a very simple manner, it is $17,000 every second of business trade between Mexico and the United States.
Wow.
That's big. We buy 11% of United States economy. Exports, which is fantastic, okay? And if we had more money, we'd buy more, okay? But that's good. And we also sell a lot to the United States. We're second to Canada. When we started NAFTA 20 years ago, we were 1/3 of Canada's economy. I believe this year we're going to be about exactly the same size between Canada and Mexico working with the United States. And I think we have a lot more to go into it because, to see very honest how the world is, there is really 3 big suppliers of the markets: Europe, North America, and Asia. And nowadays, we need to work hard for North America, with United States as leader and complementation between Mexico and Canada, we can continue doing that North America be the most competitive market in the world. Just 2 months ago, United States lost for the first time being the #1 exporter in the world, and they lost it to China. So they are moving towards organizing themselves. Europe has done themselves. We need to do exactly the same here. And we can do it together. You're talking now about 3 countries, #1 country in the world, and 2 other countries which are among the first 14 in the world. And that is very strong. And we can really do it in a complementation basis like we have always done. We do not compete each other, but we complement each other to do a better competitiveness with respect to the world.
So I get the sense that you're saying that rather than trying to figure out a way to be separate, create higher borders,
Yes.
stronger borders, to figure out a way to make them more supple and be able to have a strong exchange back and forth.
Definitely, yes. I will tell you a phrase that I always used since I was a trade commissioner of Mexico. I always ended my presentation saying, remember we're neighbors and there is nothing we can do about it. We will be together for the rest of our lives. So let us not spend the time regretting such a situation, but take advantage of it and make the best of it. And believe me, you can take advantages from Canada and from Mexico to continue being the #1 country in the world. Work with us. That's why we have in NAFTA. We've been doing it for 20 years, and now everybody wants to do free trade agreements like we did 20 years ago. Mexico has, we have free trade agreement with 56 countries in the world. We have done 13 trade agreements just with the past one with the Trans-Pacific. We are very, very open in that. The Mexican economy is more open than the Germany or the English economy. We have had in Mexico a very steady situation on elections since 1934. We have 6 parties in Mexico, and we have had, since 1934, pacific elections and trading the power from one to another party without any problem. And, yes.
Pardon me for interrupting. So do you see that the image of Mexico is changing?
Yes, and I want people to understand that Mexico is a very good country, an economic country, a very good ally for United States, and a good partner with United States in order to continue being the number one. You have been always number one. We can work together with you and do it like we have done with the NAFTA, which has been very beneficial for all the three countries.
He mentioned the cultural events that they host, and I've been lucky enough to go to a couple of them. I had never been to the big theater out at the museum, and was able to go to the film that they made about the monarch butterflies. And it's interesting to watch that film and understand that animals and birds and these beautiful butterflies, the borders don't seem to matter to them.
That's right.
They come here when they need to, they go there when they need to, and it seems to work pretty well there. And we're just lucky here in Denver to have such great partners in what we do at the DA's office and with law enforcement. But to have this centered in Denver is a huge asset to our city and to the state of Colorado.
And believe me, it's very important. You have a great governor, and the governor of Colorado is thinking in north, south, not east, west in terms of trade. And that is the way. We are also very important in Colorado's trade. We are number one buying agricultural products here and the second one in buying products from Colorado. So we do work very nicely with you. And we do other things in common. You know, we have so many things in common that we can do together. We have Mexicans on both sides. And when you bring Mexican migration here, which you have, Mexican migration also collaborates with you on your economy. Look at the way Colorado is. Colorado is above the average of the United States. And that migration of people also produce here, and they spend their money here, and that really helps the economy. We're not living out of your economy. We're working with your economy and complying and helping your economy to grow, which is very important.
So we just have about a minute or less left. What do you see the future? How does it look to you, the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico, and what role your office plays?
Well, it will be wonderful. We will continue working and working harder. We every day need each other much more and more. You know, United States is the second Spanish-speaking country in the world. Did you know that? After Mexico. The second biggest Spanish-speaking country in the world is United States. And we have a lot of things in common, like I said, not just the border, but a lot of cultural things, a lot of benefits, a lot of nature together, and we can explode and work that together. We are in the best relations that we have ever had, and we're very proud to continue doing it. This country was made out of immigrants, and I think that we can still work very well on those bases.
Well, we have a lot more to talk about. We'll have to have you back on the show at another time. So nice of you to join us. Thanks for being here. Thank you to Consul-General Carlos Bello. Thanks for being here. And Javier, thank you so much for being here as well, for being our guest today on Denver Dialogue Denver DA with Mitch Morrissey. I'm Tamara Banks. Have a great time.
Denver 8 TV, your city, your source.